People always ask me, Keith, how did you learn enough about the faith to write your book, The Convert's Guide to Roman Catholicism? It's easier to show you. Hold on.
Upload begins when you press here. Hit me. Where's the bathroom?
And that's how you convert people to Catholicism.
That's got to be the best one I've ever seen. I'm telling you.
What is that movie? Johnny Mnemonic or something? I don't think I ever saw that movie.
I haven't seen that one either.
I'm not sure, actually.
Yeah, I don't know. But everybody makes the joke that you look like
Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, Keanu Reeves. So Keith Nestor, man, one of our favorite people to have on.
Thank you, fellas.
Yeah, people probably don't know, but Keith and I are like besties behind the scenes. We talk like
don't tell anybody, dude. You have any idea how many times I have to like apologize for being your friend?
Right? It happens way more than it should.
One of my,
Or I was like, wait a minute. You know that guy?
One of my favorite things about Keith is that Keith's wife will find misogynistic stuff online and send it to Keith to send me.
That is a true statement. That is a true
Every once in a while, Keith will just send me something about like women being bad drivers or women being dumb or something like that. And Keith will go, yeah, this was for my wife. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. She's awesome.
It's an East Coast thing. You know, she's a Philly girl, so she's got that kind of, that vibe.
A lot of people don't understand like that. A Northeast sense of humor is usually where I'm coming from. Like people think I'm mean or something like that. We're just like a little brash, little on the edgier side. But Keith, you how many years since you came into the church?
Oh man, I think it's been, it'll be 9 years in October.
9 years. So you came in under Francis, right?
Yes, sir. I came in right before the Summer of Shame. It was awesome.
Wow. You came in right before. So wait, were you paying super close attention to the Summer of Shame stuff, or were you just like in your honeymoon phase of becoming Catholic? Like, no, I don't want to hear it. I just want to be Catholic. Think back to 2015, 2016 era was when I was really like doing all my deep dive on Catholicism. And, there wasn't really a lot of the same stuff that there is out now in terms of YouTube-ish kind of things, It was a lot of like Steve Ray videos, Scott Hahn videos. I mean, kind of the normal stuff that you would have back in the day. But when I was a new Catholic, I was right there with like TNT, man, back in the old school TNT days, so that's sort of where I got my explanation of all those issues. So that's kind of how I came into all that. But to be real with you guys, like I didn't go down the rabbit hole of all of that stuff because it just wasn't something that I was interested in, Yeah, I tell you, we did it for like, I don't think we were ever like obsessive on it. We would talk about like stuff if it was like a major thing, but even from the beginning of our show, we were always like, I don't know. We don't want to add to the noise of like just dunking on the hierarchy and stuff. And the Francis era was a unique time. I think things have changed a lot under Leo, at least on the surface level.
But I do think that people come into the church and they get kind of like a spiritual high. Like you learn everything about Catholicism. You come into the church and you have this spiritual high and you just want to proclaim the Catholic Church and the Catholic faith from the rooftops. And then there probably comes like a sobering moment where the high wears off. And then like real life living out your faith comes into play. So you had written a book about like what to do when you become Catholic, right?
Yeah. And it's so weird. So this is the book I wrote, The Convert's Guide to Roman Catholicism, your first year in the church. And we'll get into some of this, but when I became Catholic, the last thing on my mind was to ever do any kind of public facing thing at all. That was not on my radar, you know? So writing a book, giving talks, doing YouTube, anything like no way. I just got a job and worked and was a Catholic. And then it was about a year later that I got the idea, and I really believe it was from God. And it's funny, that intro, you know, it's him getting that download. That's literally how it happened to me. We were on a bus heading to, we did a pilgrimage over to Medjugorje, and we were leaving, and on that bus, like this thing hit me where I was just like, I need to write this book. And so I just came home and I started working on it, but I didn't have a publisher. I still don't have a publisher. And I just cranked it out, man. And I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but it was one of those things where I felt like this is what God wanted me to do. I don't have the plan. I don't have the strategy. And I didn't really care because that wasn't my goal. I just wanted to be obedient. So I wrote that book, and the book really is about what it's like to be a new Catholic. It's not an apologetics book on why you should be Catholic. And it's not a book on like the deep side of your faith. It's more of the practical realities that new converts face. So
what are some of them? Like, because I mean, I'm obviously a cradle Catholic, right?
So some of this stuff you wouldn't have to deal with.
It's in my DNA. I, you know, raised as a Catholic. So like, there's probably some that would be obvious, like, you know, dealing with family that don't understand your conversion and stuff. But is there any like huge cultural things that you're just like, man, this is going to take some getting used to?
There's so many. Are you kidding me? That's the main thing. Like this book is about the culture. So like the first practical thing that I get into, I talk about why do people convert in the first place. But the first thing I talk about really, I think it's chapter 3. It's called How to Not Have a Holy War, Coming Out as a Catholic. And it's how you tell people that you're Catholic. How do you tell your family and friends? Like, what are you supposed to do with that? Because that's the thing, you know, when you're an evangelical or a Protestant or something, and you become Catholic, you have to figure out how you're going to let that cat out of the bag. And so that was really my first sort of practical tip that I gave people on how to do that and it was really more about what not to do than what to do. So I have a chapter on that. I have a chapter on like walking through the mass, relating to the mass as a former Protestant. What are the things of the mass that you need to be keyed in on? Here's another one that most people don't think about. How do you find a parish? Like how do you church shop as a Catholic? And because that's a different
cradles deal with that too, though.
Yeah, they do, but they deal with it differently. It's a completely different understanding, because here's the thing, right? Converts, especially from evangelicalism, are used to being the most important person in the room when they go to church.
Yeah.
All right. From the moment they arrive on the property, there are people who are trained to make you feel like you are a VIP, man, 100%. And so you have all sorts of, you know, greeters and all this stuff for new visitors and everything. It's like, oh, you're catered to in so many ways, special parking lot spaces, all this, you know. Well, you guys know this, as a Catholic, you show up, nobody gives a flying rip you're there. You know?
Not just that, like Catholics hog the aisle and don't let you like get in past them. It's like, it's that's a cradle thing. We like doing that. We don't like to let the converts feel welcome. So we hog the aisle
so they can't step over us.
We want to make sure people are very uncomfortable when they come.
Yeah. So stuff like that. I mean, how do you do that? How do you prepare yourself to walk in, like, you know, because that can be shocking, but beneath all of that really is understanding, and this is the key to everything, really, understanding the why behind the what. Why are things the way they are? Cradle Catholics usually don't think about it. That's just how it is. It's the air you breathe, which is understandable. but converts oftentimes come in and they have to figure out, okay, why is it this way? Why do we do this? Why don't we do that? How come, when you go into mass, everyone's super quiet. I'm used to going in, there's a countdown, a band playing, everybody's high-fiving each other, drinking coffee and talking about their weekend, and then you go to Catholic mass, like, oh my goodness, is our funeral going on first here? What's the deal? So there's cultural things like that. And then of course there's the cultural things of just being Catholic that are different, how people talk about their faith, the words we use, different things like that. So anyway, that's what the whole book was about.
The lingo is so different, right? When you listen to, man, especially being on like dealing with Protestant Twitter, you like the catchphrases that like the finished work of Jesus Christ, right? Like these little catchphrases that they have it's like, I call it catchphrase Christianity, where they think that like saying a certain phrase is what saves you, things like that you have to kind of break out.
I mean, even as a cradle, like, I don't know.
I'll be right back, fellas.
Okay.
Yeah, all right, go ahead. So Keith's son is stationed in Syria, and right before he came on, his son got like an emergency alert. So Keith was like, if I got to dip out, it's just to make sure my son's okay. So let's pray his son's okay first off. But yeah, like Rob, you think about our lingo, we kind of, especially with the Catholic answers, like over the past couple of decades of them shaping us because of being in response to the Protestants, like we have our own lingo too that kind of settles in too,
I don't know what age I would have been exactly, but like as a cradle Catholic, the first time having, like an evangelical ask you, are you saved? It's like, well, what do you mean? Like, what the heck do you mean?
My neighbors. Everything okay?
Yep. Everything's good. Thank you guys. Good. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I was just about to say, Rob said like the first time he heard like the evangelical, or have you been saved yet? So like, huh? I had a neighbor who lived down the block from me, and they were like super born again evangelical. And I remember we were playing Manhunt. I was like 11 years old, and the kid was like, "You're Catholic. You're going to hell. You haven't been saved."
First off, can we just appreciate the irony of, a young Italian American playing Manhunt?
Manhunt, dude.
Was it training you guys?
We lived on a court. Like all the kids were friends, but the one kid's mother like programmed in their heads this anti-Catholicism from when they were little. So that was like the first time I ever came across a Protestant. I remember talking to my mom, and my mom was in like a prayer group with the mom. It was like a woman's prayer meeting that they did together. And my mom had to like set the mother straight and tell her kids not to say that. It was kind of bizarre, but yeah, you're getting into the lingo, right? Right, Keith?
Yeah. So I'll give you a couple examples. So, you talk about like the finished work of Christ and things like that. Catholics are always talking about offering it up, when you're going through something, offer it up. Like Protestants have no idea what that means. Okay. So when you say offer it up, they look at you like, what are you talking about? Also, when you're talking about like prayer in the Protestant world, you don't say prayer intentions, you say prayer requests. Yeah. So when you're like, hey, I got a prayer request in the Catholic Church, they're like, what's that? But they're always like, what are your intentions? Like, I remember when someone said it, I was like, all right, let's pray. And they're like, what are your intentions? I'm like, my intention is to pray. What are you talking about?
That is kind of funny. I wouldn't even think
they're like, no, like, what are your intentions? I'm like, to like dialogue with Jesus. That's what I want to do. I mean, so there are different lingo things. And then like other weird stuff too. I tell a story in this book about the first time I met a priest and was talking to him about the faith. I was invited to go to like the Knights of Columbus Hall or whatever for a fish fry. And so I went, and the priest comes up to the table with 2 pitchers of beer and he puts them down on the table. He's like, all right, good to have you. And I was just like so scandalized by that. I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? So just like
is there a bit of relief? Is there a bit of relief in that, right? Like you come from, because the cliche is that Protestants take their faith so seriously and Catholics are kind of, but there is something to just like sitting and hanging with the priest and having a beer. That's got to be a bit of a relief that you could kind of just like be normal a little bit, I would think.
Yeah, well, it's it's interesting because I mean there are Protestants that do that. Don't get me wrong. I mean, like the Reform guys I know all do that.
Oh, okay.
They're all into that stuff. Most of them. Maybe not some of the Reformed Baptists, but I don't know. There's just different attitudes around things, and some of the culture is different, and not all of it is just like this, weird kind of goofy stuff, but some of it is just like amazing.
Yeah.
To where, like for example, I have never been asked. Well, when I first became Catholic, nobody, when I kind of showed up and nobody really knew who I was or what I was doing, nobody said, "Hey, Keith, what do you do for a job?" Nobody cared. Like your vocation is are you a father or are you religious or are you like what's your state in life? But there's a different understanding about that and a different way of viewing community. And the other thing I thought that was so interesting is from a practical perspective, this is one of my favorite things about being Catholic, but I thought it was going to drive me crazy, was that we don't segment our worship. Like, for example, we had all these different worship services, not because we needed the room, but because, hey, some people like traditional worship. Some people like contemporary worship. Some people like country music. So there's like cowboy church. There's hipster church. There's rock and roll church. There's
seeker
rap
sensitive,
church.
right?
Like
it's
every
very
kind of subculture that you can think of. You're going to find people in the church that put you in these little categories. Well, like the first time I went to like a men's prayer group at my parish, it was all dudes of all different ages. And that kind of thing just never happens in Protestant world. Typically, it's usually like, all right, the young men do this, the older men do this. Like everybody's always getting segmented up, and I loved it. I just am so excited that we come in. It's like, we're just Catholic. That's our identity.
I want to actually point to all right. So I want to get into like a couple of things especially if there are new people checking this video out.
I got a list, brother. I got a list.
Yes. But I am curious about this, like because this, I mean, you came on our show and like shared your testimony with us, right? Like you came on and told us your conversion story. And that's a very Protestant thing, right? To share your testimony and talk about how Christ changed your life and stuff. And especially because we also have to get to the conversions in your family that have just happened too. But me raising my kids Catholic, I've talked about it on the show a little bit. It gets a little tricky if you're always hearing these testimonies about these drastic conversions to Christ. And my kids were just kind of raised in the faith and always had a sacramental life. And they didn't have some moment where they like fell deep into mortal sin and then Christ rescues them from it. They didn't have their prodigal son moment, basically, right?
Yeah.
So it's something that's I see creeping into Catholicism where everybody comes on and shares their testimony. I understand it from a convert perspective, but I think Catholics, like cradle Catholics, are a little off. Like they're like, oh, what do I do with this? I think.
Well, I think, okay, so here's my take on that. I think everybody, I mean, we all have a story one way or the other. Okay. And one of the most effective things you can do to share your faith with people is to tell them your faith story, your journey. And you have one, even as a cradle Catholic growing up in the faith, right? So that's totally okay. And I grew up in the church camp world where it was like somebody grabbed the microphone and, there were people that were running through jungles, chased by, gangs that found Jesus, like people had these crazy, wild stories. And it almost became like this competitive thing, like who's got the most dramatic, crazy testimony. And, I think that that's just kind of entertainment to a certain degree, right? It can be, because then it becomes all about that person. Your testimony should never highlight you. It should be about Jesus. And the way that we tell our stories needs to be able to connect with people and point them to Christ, not to ourselves.
And I do think they're helpful, right? Yeah. Like especially if somebody's like a drug abuser and like they have this drastic, like that could inspire somebody else who's into I definitely think they're useful and that they're helpful, especially for a lot of people who need to hear them for the first time. My concern is a little bit about my own, because my son had said it to me. He's like, Dad, I don't know. I hear all these stories. And is it like, even for me, like I had a deep reversion moment where God hit me over the head with a 2x4. And when I tell my kids that, they're like, well, I don't know. I never had that. I just kind of believe in God,
Well, I think that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I would rather I would rather have kids that didn't need to be rescued because they were, you know, brought up in the faith. I mean, that's the goal. So it's funny. So like I was at this men's retreat a couple of months ago, and this dude, we were talking about the same exact issue. This guy who's probably like 60 years old. He goes, you know, I really don't have any kind of dramatic conversion story. He says, I was raised Catholic. You know, I'm just a dad. I've got 7 kids and they're all adults and they're all still Catholic. And I was like, you are the hero.
Yeah.
You are the hero.
Yeah.
I'm not the hero. You're the hero. You ought to come up instead of me giving a talk. You ought to give a talk. If you can and he's this guy, super simple blue collar guy. Right. And he was just like, I don't know. I don't really have anything to share. I just raised 7 kids and they're all still Catholic. I'm like, that's huge,
and that's something I think a lot of people probably need to hear also. Like, what did you do to keep those kids in the church and not have that time period where they fall away? Right. So that's
my point, dude. Here's the thing. Our conversion stories aren't just about the dramatic past and the crazy, you know, hook. It's about how we live our faith out, because the reality is we're all converts and we convert every single day. It's not just the conversion I had, you know, 10 years ago when I decided to become Catholic. Every single day I have to freaking convert because my flesh wants to take me a certain place and the devil's tempting me and I'm dealing with the things. So every moment there's an opportunity for me to convert. And I think we need to tell those stories more and more about not just, hey, here's my conversion story, but how do I live out the faith? And I have learned so much from guys like you who are cradle Catholics who don't have all that. I mean, I know you have your deal, but who guys that are just like, okay, I don't have this boring, I just have this boring story. No. That's huge. Everybody has something to share about that, you know? And I think that can be a huge thing. So I'm personally like, I'm all about hearing the stories. I love listening to people talk about their faith journey. And that's why, like, when I do my interviews on my channel, sometimes I know that it's going to be like a big conversion, right? But sometimes I'm interviewing people who didn't convert necessarily in this traditional sense, but I'll just say, let's talk about your faith journey. You know, what's that looked like? And everybody's got something to share when it comes to that.
Yeah. I'll tell you the first time we had you on was, I think, 3 years ago. And I remember you didn't really want to talk because you have your conversion 9 years ago, but your children are all adults.
Yeah.
So it's like, it was a topic I remember asking you a little bit about, and you were like, it's kind of a touchy subject, and you didn't want to dive into it too much. But now 9 years later after your conversion, I saw you made it, and me and you have talked behind the scenes, obviously, a little bit about it, but you had some huge announcements in your family this year, right?
We did, man. So I have 3 kids. I have a daughter and then 2 sons. And when we converted, they were like 15, 17, and 18, like, you know, ish, maybe just turned 19. And they, you know, I did a terrible job explaining to them what we had done. They were in the years where it was like they had their own life they were sort of
in the church you were a pastor at, right?
Yeah.
Like they're in the church that Keith was a pastor at.
Yeah, they were in the youth group. They were in the church. My daughter was an intern. My son was in the prayer. Both my sons played in the worship team. Like they were very plugged in. And then now all of a sudden we're Catholic. And at first we were like, well, what do we do? You know, so we brought them to go to mass with us. And honestly, they didn't connect with it at all.
Yeah.
And they were like, we hate this. Do we still have to do this? And our priest had told us, you know, you can't make your kids do this. They're too old to make them do this. So long story short, they chose to not have anything to do with it. And it was really hard. You know, my wife would go into church and she would just bawl every Sunday because our family's now divided. And it was really, really tough. And, you know, I was so on fire for the Catholic faith that I'm out there just beating everybody over the head with it. And they were like, we don't want to hear any more about this, Dad. Yeah. And they actually literally said to me one time, you need to stop talking to us about it. So anyway, we've kind of, you know, at the same time, our family's really close. So there's a lot of support just to what we're doing. And, you know, they would kind of whatever. And there'd be moments where we would get a little glimmer of hope that maybe this is going to be a thing. Well, about 2 years ago, my daughter, who had just recently got married, it's very interesting. She was working as a worship leader at this Protestant church. and her new husband and her were having a conversation about some different things. Anyway, I go to this first Saturday mass, and I'm just praying to Our Lady. I'm just saying, hey, I need a signal grace. I need, and first, those of you who don't know, new Catholics, a signal grace, a little lingo here. That's just a grace. We'll just call it little kisses from heaven for you people. Okay. It's a little angel feather that fell down from the sky of God saying that I see what you're doing, and here's a little grace. Okay. And I asked for that because it's one of the promises of praying the rosary every day, which I've been doing for years at that point in time. I'm walking out to my car, and my daughter FaceTimes me, and I'm like, what's up? She says, hey, Dad, what time is mass tomorrow? And I said, why? And, her husband's name's Brian. She's like, Brian and I, we want to come. And I'm like, really? She's like, yeah. And I said, well, we go to the Latin mass. It's at 8:00 in the morning. And she goes, oh, good. I like that one better anyway. And so I'm like, all right. So they came to the mass with us. And then that just opened the door to these conversations. And we found out that Brian, so get this, man, my son-in-law, Brian, great dude. He's, not that this matters, but he's like 6'8", 350 pounds, giant dude. My daughter is this little itty bitty thing. She's barely 5 foot tall. Brian's a very intimidating looking guy. Right.
Yeah.
And when he comes over to my house to ask to marry my daughter, I said to him,
and you're 5'1", so you're like,
oh, no way.
This is someone who's 5'3".
I'm not 5'1". Anyway,
I'm kidding.
So he says, he's like, I want to marry your daughter. And I said, okay. I said, listen, Brian, here's the deal, man. He wasn't brought up going to church. He was abandoned by his mom and his dad. Like, he was kind of on his own, And I said, dude, you need to be the spiritual leader of your household. And I don't know, can you do that? I said, my daughter's got a strong faith. She was raised in the faith. She loves Jesus. If you're going to be her husband, you're going to have to be her leader. Can you do that? And he was like, he said, well, I'm not going to pretend that I know all this stuff, but I'm going to embrace that role, and I'm going to do the best I can. And I'm committed to growing into that, And I said, okay, dude, well, it's wild, but my unchurched son-in-law is in some ways led my daughter into the Catholic Church because
women follow their husbands.
Well, yeah. And that's what my daughter, and this is important. I know you guys talk about this a lot. My daughter, even though she was the more experienced person in the faith, she understood that her role was to submit to her husband and to follow his leadership. So she was walking that line of, okay, how do we do this? How do we do this? And basically what she did was she just said, okay, I'm going to help you with this, but you're going to have to take over, and you're going to really love this. They were watching The Chosen. Okay.
Oh.
Rob, you're going to love it, brother.
And you know me so well, Keith.
And he doesn't know anything about these stories. He doesn't know anything about the Protestant Reformation. He doesn't know anything about Luther. He doesn't know anything about any of this. And he just asked her this very simple question. He said, well, what denomination were the disciples? And my daughter was like, well, they didn't really have denominations back then. So what, he goes, I don't understand. And then she basically explained to him that Jesus started the Catholic Church. And eventually there was a Reformation, right? So he just simply goes, well, if Jesus started the Catholic Church, why aren't we Catholic? And
that's amazing.
And then she was like, well, do you want to try that? And he's like, yes. So he wasn't connecting with their, little evangelical church they were going to. He didn't, this is
He's
so
a
beautiful.
Men.
Yes,
men
it was totally and I don't want to be disparaging, but let's just say this. It's a pretty boomerish kind of new church start. That's it didn't speak to this young man.
Yeah.
And he came to the Latin mass and he was blown away and he loved it. Now it didn't make him an instant trad, but he could just sense that there was something powerful going on here that was bigger than himself.
Yeah.
And
saw the
eventually
transcendence.
that led them on this journey. And then they just kind of went cold for months. And I'm like, what is going on? So I pulled my daughter aside one day and I said, what are you doing? You flirt with this, you're thinking about it, you guys talk about it, but then whatever. And they got together and they're just like, you know what? We're going to go talk to Father. and they began that process. And then she went in and she quit her job, which was really hard for her because they needed the money.
Yeah.
And she's like, I need to trust God here. And we need to trust God here. And Brian was all for it. He was like, hey, if this is what God wants us to do, let's do it, you know? So she quit the job and they began OCIA, and they came into the church. And I'm here to tell you guys this, you know, I have never seen my daughter more full of joy and more fired up about her faith than she has been in this process. It's been absolutely incredible to see her come alive. And, you know, I mentioned this on X the other day, but she FaceTimed us on Saturday and she had her first confession. And she was like, I can't wait to receive the Eucharist tonight. I'm so excited. And she's just like, this is so, you know, I have so much joy. You know, why don't you guys ever tell me about this? You know, and yeah, I'm like, pretty smart. But so anyway, that's their story. But my son, Jesse, the one who is over in the Middle East right now, this dude wanted nothing to do with church. He was like one of these kids that was like, I hate the church. I got burned by people there. I don't want anything to do with it. You know, super smart kid, knows a lot. But he was just like, not having it. Well, he gets married to a girl from Texas who is like Baptist-ish, you know, didn't really grow up in the faith, but would call herself like a Baptist. And the two of them, like, we always have lunch on Sundays after church with our family. They would never go to church. They would just come over and we would invite them. They'd always say, no, we don't want everything, you know, whatever. Well, they get married in November of 2024. Yeah. 2024. And then he knows he's going to be deployed in the spring of 2025. So he goes overseas, and we're trying to take care of his you know, our daughter-in-law. Her name's Alyssa.
Yeah.
And if we'd invite her, hey, Alyssa, you want to come to church with us? No, I'm good. No, I'm good. I don't want that. You know, and we don't want to push, you know, we don't want to be overbearing. Yeah. And then my wife and I, just before this, we had gone on our pilgrimage to Rome. We're in the tomb of at the tomb of St. Monica in St. Augustine's church. And my wife and I are praying. We're begging St. Monica's intercession for our kids. And it was like the next day we started hearing good things about my daughter having conversations with her brother, all this kind of stuff like that. But they're still like, we're not going to church. We're not going to church. Well, then literally Charlie Kirk gets shot on Wednesday. I had asked my daughter to go to church, my daughter-in-law to go to church with me that Sunday. She said, no. Charlie Kirk gets shot on Wednesday. On Thursday, that just rocked her world, man.
Yeah.
And she texted my wife and she's like, I think I need to go to church with you guys. So we picked her up, we brought her to church, and she just bawled the whole time. And we came out and we didn't want to be like, hey, all right, so what'd you think?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So we just sort of let it set. And then the next week she came with us. And then we were like, hey, is this a thing or what? And she's like, it's a thing. And this girl, I'm not kidding you guys. It was like a switch flipped. She went from wanting nothing to do with church to now this girl is coming out of her house. We're picking her up. She's got a missal, a Bible, a miraculous medal, a rosary. She's watching all my stuff.
My goodness.
And she's like, she's going to daily mass. She's going to Eucharistic adoration. You could not stop this girl from running to the church. Like
your son's in the Middle East. Like, what the hell did you do to my wife? You freaking, what did you do?
I know I was a little bit worried about that. I'm like, and she kept saying, Jesse and I have been having these conversations. When he gets back, we want to like get into faith. We want to do these things. And I'm like, wow, okay. So she joins OCIA, right? And the leader goes to the same adoration time that we go to. On the way out, she stops to listen. She says, hey, by the way, if Jesse wants to do this overseas, we can set him up with like a remote program. And I didn't say anything. I was just like, what? And she's like, let me talk to him. And then he basically said, yeah, I want to do this too. So my daughter-in-law got baptized on the Easter Vigil along with my son-in-law. My daughter got confirmed. My granddaughter, okay, who's, about a year and a half, she's going to be baptized at Pentecost. Hopefully my son will be back by then. He will be confirmed, and then he's going to be the godfather.
Dude, this is like, you talk about a miraculous story,
it's just,
Keith.
It's just insane, man. I mean, we've got one other son that we're praying for. God bless him. But it's just been one incredible miracle at all, because yeah, you're right. You know, Christine, that they were not they were less than interested. And it's crazy.
Look, because I know so many people who one spouse is in the church and the other one isn't. And it goes to like you trying to talk to your kids about it and them just being like, we don't want to hear this, just stop. There comes a point where you have to surrender it and just recognize that God loves you and Our Lady loves you more than you love your spouse or your child. And prayer and fasting actually does work. And yeah, because the same thing happened with my wife. Like when I started taking my faith seriously, she thought I lost my mind.
Yeah.
You know, she thought I lost my mind, and I'm making her go to mass with me, and she wanted nothing to do with it. And I just had to stop trying to convince her, because me trying to argue her in the faith was having the opposite effect. It was turning her off. So I had to just surrender it and just kind of do what I was doing. And she saw the change in me, and that piqued her interest. And next thing you know, she has her deep conversion, and you know, the rest is history.
It's such a testament to the fact that, and this is important for people who are saying, how do I get my kids back in the church, or how do I get my spouse, or whatever? You can't do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason why this went down the way it did was because I needed to recognize that it wasn't within my power to make that happen. I had to let that go to the Lord and to Our Lady. And I really, truly believe that that's how it went down. And we saw things along the way that were just like, wow, like, for example, my son overseas, he messaged me one day. He's like, send me books about philosophy and theology. And I'm like, really? So we were out at Steubenville. We went up to this really cool bookstore in Pittsburgh that I heard about. Our friend took us up there, and we were praying. My wife and I were like, okay, what book should I give to Jesse? What should I get this kid? And I just was like, Holy Spirit, guide me, you know, to what I should give my son. And I just felt so led to get the Confessions of St. Augustine. And so I got that book and a few others. We put it in the mail. It takes, you know, weeks to get to where he is. And we had no idea when that would happen. The box of books showed up on St. Augustine's feast day.
Wow.
And I told Jesse, like, when he's like, hey, the books came today, I said, you may not understand that this is significant, but let me explain to you what this means. And he just was like, whoa, that's cool. I mean, and it was just one thing like that after another, where it was like, God did this, man. And that's, I think, so important for us to remember, because we can get so focused on ourselves and thinking, oh, I have to say the right thing, or give them the right this, give them the right that. What you need to do is, more than anything, you need to focus on you living out the faith in front of them and trusting that to the Lord.
There's a couple of things there. Well, first off, the Charlie Kirk thing, I think, had such an effect on the whole country, because it got my in-laws to start going back to church. It got, like, I know so many people who started to look at the world differently after that incident, right? And the other thing that I was thinking about was, even in the Gospels, Christ talks about, like, unless you hate your father and mother, like, you have to love him first, right? So, like, I didn't come to bring peace, I came to bring the sword. And you're seeing your family cleaved through this whole process, and you're in love with the Catholic faith. You're out there telling people about it. You're evangelizing countless numbers of Catholics on your channel. And meanwhile, you have this severance in your own family, and it's got to just be breaking your heart. And then all of a sudden you have like this reunification of your family coming this year. Like, I'm overjoyed for you, man. Because I know how much this has weighed on you for the past couple of years, and you started talking to me about it a couple months ago, and it's just such an awesome story.
Well, man, it's been so powerful, you know, because like our prayer community that we have every day, the Rosary Crew, you know, they know my kids. They've been praying for them. They've been sending them stuff. They've been, you know, so it's like, to see this happen, there's so many people that are rejoicing over them right now. And that's one of my favorite things about being Catholic. And I know we're going to get to this, but the beautiful thing, there's no family like Catholic family. There's no community like Catholic community. And it's not to be disparaging. Some of our best friends in the whole world are Protestants. Okay. And I thank God for them. And I'm not saying anything negative about that, but I'm just saying, like, there's a different level of fellowship in the Catholic Church. And this is something that I hear a lot from fellow converts, that they go, there's something deeper going on here than what I than where I came from. And there's a real sense of why this is important. We were talking about this at the Easter Vigil when we were sitting there with some of our other convert friends. And everybody is like in tears at these people that are coming into the church. It's this huge thing. It never was like that before, man. We used to just go into our office on Sunday morning with people who said they started coming to our church. They wanted to join, and we would literally go, okay, guess what? You're a member.
Yeah.
You know, welcome. Yeah.
And there is something profound about living out a liturgical life also, and that you're all in the communion of saints, right? Like, you're joining the communion of saints. So it's not even just the people you're with. You have the cloud of witnesses at every single mass. You have the centuries upon centuries of saints that you could reach back and dive into, that are, you know, exploring the same exact faith that you are. It's there is something really like profound and beautiful about coming into the Catholic faith. Now, look, for the new converts that are coming in, there's also, like, don't think you're coming into this perfect family that everybody agrees on everything, right? So, because I think that's probably a false sense that you might have if you're a newcomer into the church. Like, we're a very dysfunctional family, don't get us wrong. What do you think are some tips for the new convert, maybe to avoid? And maybe things what are some good things and bad things you would give, like, for advice for a new convert?
Well, the first thing I would say for a new convert is just allow yourself to celebrate. You know, you went through a process. You probably had some sacrifice, some suffering. You probably had some stuff you had to deal with, especially if you had marriage things you had to sort through and annulments and all that stuff. I mean, a lot of people sacrifice a lot to become Catholic. And when you finally get to that point where you are receiving the sacraments, just take some time and thank God and be joyful and celebrate and have fun with it. Okay. Yeah. Catholics are too freaking serious all the time, except for you guys. But like, and that's why I think people like your show, because you guys have fun, right? But that should be part of it. So just celebrate it, drink it in. And I would also say this: set realistic goals for what you want to do. It can be so tempting to jump in and be like, all right, I'm going to pray the Liturgy of the Hours every day. I'm going to do 4 rosaries, and I'm going to pray the Angelus. I'm going to do Divine Mercy Chaplet. I'm going to do all the Ember Days. I'm going to do all the things, because there's an endless stream of things that are being thrown at you that you should do.
Countless devotions. Yeah.
Yes. And everybody you meet is going to tell you what you should do. Okay. They mean well, but they're, well, do you do the Holy Face? Well, do you do this? Do you do that?
Yeah, there's no salvation outside the brown scapular, guys.
Yeah. You have to just like treat your new faith like you just were served a gourmet meal, and you're going to eat it slowly, and you're going to savor every morsel. You're not going to just plow it down, right?
Because it will last a lifetime.
Exactly. You've got your whole life. So just go slow, set realistic goals, and enter into it with kind of a healthy pace. Don't overdo it, because you could get burned out.
Yeah.
And also remember, here's another thing I would tell people: only look to people who are helpful to you and nobody else. You will not have a shortage of people in your life as a Catholic that are gonna make it difficult for you to be excited about being Catholic. Obviously, the scandals, obviously people who do bad things, but there may be even people in your parish that just get on your nerves and annoy you. There may be people that are just put you off or act weird or whatever. You don't need to deal with that. Find your people, okay, and settle into that. But don't think that you have to be all things to all people in the Catholic Church right away. So I think those are some of the things, just the mindset when you come in, you know.
I would say, all right, I'd say a couple of things also. Like he said, like, there's a million devotions out there. Find the one that actually suits you, because don't overwhelm yourself. You don't need to do every single one of them, right? I would say that the rosary is probably indispensable. I would say, and a big part of the rosary is not like you're praying a certain amount of Hail Marys and you have to meditate on the mysteries perfectly. I would, because I have a hard time meditating on the mysteries. A lot of times I'm driving when I pray the rosary. Look at the rosary more as developing a relationship with the Mother of God. Like that's first and foremost what the rosary is. It's how you develop a relationship with Our Lady. That one would be indispensable. The other one is, if you're a new convert, I would say stay out of liturgy wars right away.
Oh, yeah, that was on my list too. I think here's the thing. I think you need to, as a convert, I think you need to stay quiet online, but live out loud in real life.
Yes.
Okay. So I don't think you should insert yourself into all this online arguments and discourse. And I'm going to get in debates. I'm going to own people. I'm going to, do all this stuff. You don't need that. Yeah. But what you do need to do is be on fire for your faith in real life.
Yeah.
So don't fall into the trap of, some grumpy old Catholic person who goes, well, you just need to calm down. You converts are too on fire. You guys need to just settle down. No, you don't need to do that. Tell that person to shut up. Okay.
Yeah. And you should never lose that fire. You should always keep that.
But don't feel like, and I know you guys talk about this too, but if the first thing you do when you become Catholic is start arguing with people online, you're going to be in trouble. So just
look, there's a couple of temptations with the online stuff. One is that you think it's like you need to argue about everything. The other one is the liturgy wars you have to be super careful about. But also don't let faith alone as a Protestant then become faith alone plus the sacraments as a Catholic, right? Like you have to, don't think that becoming Catholic is just an ascent to another set of beliefs. Being Catholic is a way of life, and you kind of have to learn to live it. And the sacraments will hopefully bring stability to your faith. Because I remember before I understood all this stuff, I used to I probably did 5 or 6 altar calls in my car before I understood the sacraments and stuff, because you'll be on fire for God 1 minute and then you kind of fall back into sin and you go back to your old ways. And then all of a sudden you have to give your life back to Jesus all over again. And that was kind of my life until I really settled into a sacramental life. Sacramental life will bring stability to your faith. Stay away from mortal sin. I'm just going to tell you, use the confessional as frequently as you can. Get used to it. The longer you go without confession, the harder it is. The more frequently you go, the easier it becomes. And the online discourse is dangerous, especially when you're delving into it just gets crazy. Don't let anybody tell you that if you're not going to if people are telling you have to go to a Latin mass, don't even worry about that stuff yet. Just become Catholic, live a liturgical life, and see where God leads you from there with that.
Yeah, I think living the liturgical life is enough for you to get started in your first year. You need to walk through that cycle and not be focusing on what other people are doing, but you need to be inspired, and you need to work through these things and experience at least a year of that whole liturgical life, and just drink it in without any external pressures to try to argue with people or mess with other people or doing anything like that. I just think that that's dangerous. And I meet a lot of people. I talk to a lot of people who, especially people that are in ministry, who are going to become Catholic. And it's the first thing that they do is they think, okay, how do I make this a job or whatever? It's no, that's the last thing that should never cross your mind, right? That's not what you want to do. And then just let God drive that ship for you. But don't feel like you are coming in and God has a job for you. Your job is to rest and be in the sacraments and be in the church and just absorb and rest, and then let him unveil that stuff to you as time goes on.
I think there should be a couple of year waiting period before somebody, if you become Catholic, because the instinct is to want to get out there and tell your story to everybody. But becoming a public Catholic there's danger to it, right? There just is in general. You and I are, all three of us are public Catholics. And I know a lot of guys who are public Catholics, and especially if you're going to try to earn income from this, like becoming a professional Catholic is a scary thing because you right off the bat, you're trying to get clicks and views, and it takes away the joy of living out the actual faith. Like just appreciate being Catholic.
You feel like you need to have an opinion on every little thing in the church.
Boom. That's a great way to put it, Rob. It's like if you feel like, because the thing you got to realize is, and these can be two different conversations. Like, I do think that it's okay. I think it's good for even new Catholics to be able to explain to people why they became Catholic.
Yeah.
So I think if someone says to you, hey, we got some friends together, we want you to come over and tell us what you did. Tell us why you became, share your story or whatever. Or even if somebody says, hey, I have a podcast, come on and share your story, how you became Catholic. I think it's one thing to share your story, because here's the thing. You should never go out there and pretend to be an expert in something that you're not an expert in.
Yeah.
Now, you can be an expert in your own story, okay? But that doesn't make you an expert in Catholic theology or liturgy or whatever. So be very careful about what you put yourself into. So like if someone says, hey, we just want you to share your testimony or your conversion, whatever, that's one thing. But if it's like, hey, will you give us tell us about this particular thing or that particular, I think you should.
Yeah. Well, especially because you may have learned something that made total sense for you and it was part of even why you converted. And you'll think like, that's the only way to see it as a Catholic. And then all of a sudden somebody else that knows the subject more than you and has more of a, maybe even like understanding it from a traditional standpoint what'll happen is it'll lead to you feeling silly because you spoke on something you don't necessarily know that well.
That will happen no matter how many years you've waited.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it took me years to hear all the different perspectives on things. And I remember, I'd hear something on Catholic Answers and I thought like, that's the only way to see the issue. And then all of a sudden you see something from a different perspective. You're like, oh, okay, maybe I should have chilled out with like gunning for that specific thing,
especially if you're coming in from like Protestantism, you're coming into a church where, you learn that there's a magisterium and we have all these, definitive answers and where things are definitely right. And you just assume that, well, that means there's a definitive answer for everything, not realizing that most things the church is pretty open as to it being kind of an open question that people get to decide for themselves.
Yeah, something like the death penalty. Like you don't want to jump into the death penalty debate because you heard a John Paul sermon. Like you want to, these are things to just be cautious of as you're coming in. I would say
100%. And along that line, I think the other thing that you have to do is you have to develop a thick skin and a soft heart, because you're going to run into things that are going to challenge you, that are going to be tough, and you're going to still be dealing with some fallout from your past, from people questioning you and challenging you, and maybe even criticizing you, and that's hard to deal with sometimes. Like you've been on this journey of faith because you're passionate about Jesus, and then people you were friends with for years are going to tell other people that you're not a Christian anymore. So you have to develop a thick skin to the constant criticism, and it kind of can have that effect on you. We're just like, I'm sick of talking to people because I don't want to have to like explain to people that I'm still a Christian because I became Catholic, for crying out loud. So you have to have that thick skin, but you also have to have a soft heart, because you have to remember that they just don't know. Yeah. They don't know what you're experiencing and why you did what you did. They're in that place where you probably were at one time. So you have to have compassion for them and not get angry and take it out on them. But, that thick skin to protect your own emotional well-being, so you're not like falling apart every time, you realize that some guy you were friends with for 10 years blocked you on Facebook because you're Catholic, but then also, or because you reached out to people,
screenshotted a tweet that thought was kind of funny and tweeted that out.
Oh, we'll get into that on Locals. We're going to do that on Locals. Yeah, for anybody that doesn't know, I got blocked by Anthony Stein today. So we'll get into that a little bit on Locals. Yeah, I noticed something today. It's kind of funny. Some of the people that say the most awful things about the Pope have this undying loyalty to Donald Trump. And I'm like, I think there might be something a little off there. If you criticize the Pope, they're all for it, but as soon as you criticize Trump, they're ready to jump down your throat as if he's the Holy Father or something. So let me ask you this, Keith. What do you think there is an actual surge in conversions right now, or do you think that we live in an echo chamber and we're online? So we say like you hear the public, you know, you see it on Fox News and all these people talking about this surge in Catholic conversion. Did you notice it at your parish this year, or?
We had a pretty strong group. We had 15 people come in at the Easter Vigil, and we had a few more come in earlier than that, and a few more that are in the pipeline right now. And I travel a lot doing different events, and everywhere I go, I hear the same thing, you know, that there's record numbers of people in these programs that are coming through, and it's across the board that I've seen. I know that's kind of anecdotally because I'm not like doing some big mass survey, but I've heard that from a lot of people.
At the same time, we know parishes are closing at an astounding rate still. So it's like there's things to definitely be hopeful for, but I think that we have to keep a realistic perspective on it. And one of the things I definitely wanted to talk about before we go over to the other side is like understand what you signed up for as a Catholic. And this isn't just for new converts, this is for all Catholics. Like you have to really understand what you signed up for, in that it's easy to say, oh, Christ transforms our suffering. And it's easy to say, oh, offer it up. But when those things come into action, they're a very different thing. Like we were talking in the green room about Cameron Riker. Cameron Riker lost his 2.5-month-old son, right? And it's one thing to, you know, say you just need to trust God. But Cameron's dealing with that in a very profound way right now, right? And I can't imagine what this Good Friday must have been like for his wife, watching Our Lady go through what she went through, losing her son. And they just lost theirs. But there is this, I watched Cameron's video today, and it was a beautiful video.
Oh, I watched it too. It was heartbreaking though, too.
Talked about with suffering and understanding this stuff. And even to Cameron, I almost wanted to say to him, because he was like, you know, we never doubted God's providence and all this. We understand God's love. But sometimes you may come across things where you are angry at God. And sometimes those are our most heartfelt prayers to him, you know, where you're angry at God and you're crying out, and it's okay to even have those moments as a Catholic too, I would say.
Well, here's where Catholicism really shines, in those moments. You know, like Catholicism has such a holistic view of the human experience, that where these issues of human suffering and sorrow are not things that make you go, wait, this doesn't compute. I serve God. God loves me. Therefore, bad things shouldn't happen to me. In Catholicism, it's baked into the human experience. And not only that, it's part of how we express our love to God and how we accomplish his will through redemptive suffering, through offering that stuff to him and growing closer to him in and through that. Our suffering is no longer this thing that seems outside of our religious experience. It's the heart of it. And Catholicism is able to really help you step into that. Whereas a lot of the, you know, other traditions, you just have to kind of scratch your head and go, well, it's a mystery. We don't get it, you know? Yeah. But like I've seen in Catholicism, there's a beauty to it, I would even say, that is so deep and profound that makes me feel like, wow, I'm really entering into our Lord's Passion, because that's the heart of Catholic spirituality, is the cross, the Eucharist, his body and blood shed for us. That's really the heart of everything. And when we enter into that, we're invited to bring our stuff too. We're not told, well, you won't have any. We're invited to bring our stuff. Not, well, if you do all the good things, God is going to bless you and he's going to.
Yeah, we're not prosperity gospel.
No. So I saw that today, and I was, you know, I was really inspired by Cameron with that, because I thought to myself, man, praise the Lord for this guy, you know, and because I know a lot of people who deconstructed their faith as soon as something bad happened to them, you know.
Yeah. Look, and even if something that tragic doesn't happen to you, you're going to come in for a lot of people, and you're going to think you're on fire for this faith, and you're going to think like, oh man, I can't wait to have the hierarchy behind me. And that isn't something you have to look forward to. I'm just telling you, And you have to remember the Judas element is part of the story. You're going to have deceptive clergy involved in here. And I made a post today about how, like, we're kind of not in this triumphalist stage in Christianity right now, where we're going out and conquering the pagan nations and stuff. There's something mysterious that God is doing right now where it's a little tricky. So if you're coming in and you're expecting things to just be especially with all these news stories coming out about the massive conversions and, oh, we're winning, just brace yourselves for suffering, because being a Catholic, like the defining part of being Catholic is suffering. And the other thing should be fasting and sacrifice, right? Yep. So if you're coming in, don't take lightly the church's it's suggestions at this point, because the only requirements are Ash Wednesday and Good Friday, but make fasting a part of your daily Catholic life. Learn to live a life of fast, feast. Make Sundays feast days, and try to fast during the week a little bit. And Fridays, don't eat meat. And because living that life of fast, feast it will make the feast days so much more important. This Lent, I mean, I freaking gave some things up this Lent. That Easter Day was such a joyous event for me, because I couldn't wait to have some of the stuff that I gave up, and it makes being Catholic so much more special. Yeah, and again, that's the holistic element of Catholicism with our human experience is such a powerful thing. It's underrated, I think, but it's a thing that I universally hear from converts, that when they step in, and the way they describe it is they just say things like, "This is just deeper. There's something deeper about this, and more like full." And what they're saying is that being Catholic isn't just kind of your religious affiliation. It becomes who you are. Now, I have to say, everybody doesn't do it that way. And that's why you have the parishes, that are in trouble. You have, whatever. There are a lot of Catholics who don't really practice their faith. Nominal Catholics, people go to church for heaven insurance. You're going to come across that. And I think that what we have to do, and again, this is where I think converts can be helpful sometimes, is a convert comes in with this red hot fire who's given up this stuff, and the cradle Catholics are like, "What did you do? What's all this about?" And then it's kind of like, look, you got to understand what you have, what you've always had. That's a treasure that you were born with. So take advantage of it and avail yourself to the benefits of it. And so I think sometimes that fire that these converts bring, of how excited they are and how much they've worked to come into the church, excitement can spill out to everybody else around them, which I think is a good thing. Okay, so what I want to do is two things. I want to do the knickknack promo that I didn't forget and Rob did. So knickknack.com, you're a new Catholic. We found a Catholic nicotine lozenge company, and if you don't buy these, you're not on the team. There you go. You guys, a lot of people think you got to pray the rosary to be on the team. No, you need to have knickknack lozenges to be on the team. Knickknacks are a nicotine product. Nicotine is an addictive substance. This is not a smoking cessation device. It is a Catholic sacramental.
Oh my gosh!
It's a Catholic sacramental.
How do I get myself out of here?
Here, we get rid of him. That's what we do. That's how we fix this.
Best ad ever. Knickknacks.com. Go to knickknack.com. Use code AB25% for 25% check off. 25% off at checkout. You will receive 10 years off purgatory for every pouch you buy. I'm kidding. Do not take me seriously. We love Knickknacks. They're an awesome supporter. The other thing I want to do is, Keith, what do we have to promote? Definitely, if you're a new convert, go out and buy Keith's book.
I will put that in the description after this.
A convert's guide, a new convert's guide, what to do in your first year. If you haven't started a podcast yet, you are failing as a new convert. We established that.
We do have a couple questions too.
Yeah.
Let's do the questions.
So Paul here. If you're giving counsel to a young man discerning God's will for his career, where would you start? Basically for young men looking to earn an honest living to support a family.
All right. Now this has nothing to do with being Catholic, but honestly, if I had a son who was a teenager or in high school or whatever, I would tell him this. I would say, get into the trades. Yeah. Because AI is never going to replace a plumber. AI is never going to replace an electrician. AI is never going to put a roof on your house. So if you're a physically able person, I would say do something like that, you know.
I would say do something like that also, because it's more fulfilling to do something with your hands than it is to sit at a desk all day. The couple of weeks we were shut down over the winter because we had a brutal winter in New York this year, and I was home. I had a harder time doing this show when I was home than the days when I'm at work. Like when I'm at work, I don't know, I'm busy all day. I'm able to check some stuff to see what I want to talk about. When I was home, I was like, oh man, I don't even want to get on and do this. So there's something to working with your hands that's just, I don't know, you feel like you accomplish something each day when you go to work instead of just like sitting around. Yeah, I wouldn't suggest becoming a podcaster, that's for sure.
Jeez. He said he wanted to support a family. So
yeah, there's no money in this, guys. Just so you know. There's really no money in this. And Mac is asking, who's your favorite drummer?
Oh man. Well, you know, I'm a Rush nerd, so obviously I'm going to go with Mr. Peart. But this is wild. One of my favorite drummers is actually coming to my house next week because he's a Catholic convert.
Who?
His name's Mike Miley. He plays drums in a band called Rival Sons, which is amazing. They're an incredible. Look them up. They're an incredible band. I mean, they're huge. And he's a Catholic convert, and I reached out to him, and he was like, "Man, I'm a fan of your stuff." So we've been talking, and he's actually flying out here next week.
Nice.
So,
that's got to be interesting for you, right? Like you and a guy like Matt Fradd or something, like people convert and they go looking for Catholic content, and you guys are probably the main ones that people are suggesting to them. So you probably get those interesting, odd, B-list celebrities that reach out to you and stuff like that.
Well,
right?
I had Austin Peck out here. I don't know if you saw that, but he was on Days of Our Lives for a bunch of years. Like he was like a TV star. Great guy, Latin Mass, Catholic. I mean, he's on fire for his Catholic faith, but he was in that Mass of the Ages thing called Discover Tradition. Yeah. That's where I saw him. And I'm like, dude. So I reached out to Tony from Mass of the Ages. I was like, man, I want to talk to this guy. And he connected me with him. And now we're buds.
I told people, if you start doing those Spanish parades here in America, all the Protestants will convert. That's what we really got to do. Man. You got to start doing those Spanish.
And one of the guys is saying Danny Carey from Tool. Yeah, he's an incredible drummer too. He's amazing.
Okay, so we're gonna go to the other side. We have. Oh, all right. What's your advice? Go ahead.
What's your advice if you become a sponsor for the first time this Easter, other than buying Keith books?
If you become a sponsor, okay. So if you become a sponsor, I would say just check in with your person, throughout the first year, maybe once a month or whatever. Just, hey, how's it going? How you doing? Don't lose track of them. Don't let it just be all right, I stood up there with you. I'm out of your life forever. It doesn't mean you need to babysit them every day, but just keep in touch with them and let them know that you're praying for them and there for them if they need any help.
That's good. Anything else, Rob?
Nope.
Okay, so we're gonna go over to locals. I got a few things. I want to do that catechism of Trent video, Rob. That was pretty funny.
Oh my gosh.
That was funny. I want to dig into some of the numbers on the Catholic converts a little bit. We'll discuss Anthony Stein over there. We won't keep Keith too long, but we do an after show. So if you're checking us out for the first time, you guys want to check out the after show. That's where we get into some of the more fun topics that we can't discuss on YouTube. Keith, your YouTube channel is just Keith Nestor?
Yep. And then if you want to pray the rosary with us, I have a YouTube channel called Rosary Crew with Keith Nestor, and we pray every day there as well.
You gave us the idea to start like having people come on the show and ask questions and stuff, and they led to some pretty good episodes. So
that was fun. Yeah.
It was all because of that Dominic kid
from
Keith's show.
Who reached out to me Saturday, and he asked me if I was going to the vigil at St. Rocco's. I was going into Manhattan, so I didn't get to catch him, but he's probably watching tonight because I sent them the link to the show.
What's up, Dominic? Good to see you, buddy.
But all right, so we're going to go over to locals. If you guys want to join us, check us out. Locals.com/avoiding Babylon, or is it Avoiding Babylon?
It's literally on the bottom of the screen.
Bottom of the screen. You guys click on it, get over there. It's where we have all the fun. All right, take us out, Rob.
Oh, let's see. I think I got another video with Keith in it here.
Hold on. Do that one.
Goodness.
Yeah. Do that one.
Wait. Not the plain one.
No, the other Taffy video, no?
No, we're gonna do this one.
Here in this place, new light is streaming. Now is the darkness vanished away. See in this space our fears and our dreamings, brought near to you in the light of this day.
Gather us in the lost and forsaken, gather us in the blind and the lame. Call to us now and we shall awaken, we shall arise at the sound of our name.
We are the young, our minds are a mystery. We are the old, we yearn for your faith. We have been found throughout all of history, called to be light to the whole human race.